Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about blood magic in occult rituals. In this video, we're going to be talking about what blood magic is. We're also going to talk about some correspondences and properties of blood. I want to really give a full perspective on how sacred blood magic is to a lot of people's spiritual practices. We're also going to talk about 4 different aspects to blood magic rituals. We're going to talk about how to perform blood magic safely and many, many other things. But before we get into that, I have to start with some disclaimers first. This is a practice that gets a lot of hate from people that don't understand what it is that's actually going on. It is part of many people's spiritual practices, and we are going to treat it with the respect that it deserves. So if anybody is blatantly rude or disrespectful in the comments, you will be deleted and blocked from this channel, because I am not playing around when it comes to this subject. There is so much stigma, there's so much negative connotation that goes into the words blood magic, and I really want to try to break down those barriers and discuss what it actually is versus what people think it is. At the time of filming this, I'm not quite sure the privacy settings that I'm going to have on this video. This video may end up just being for my channel members, or I may decide to post it out for the general public. Not quite sure yet. I know that if I don't post it to the public, there are going to be a lot of subscribers that are really angry with me for that, putting it behind a paywall and having it available only for channel members. But you have to keep in mind that I need to keep my safety as a content creator as a priority. And unfortunately, because this topic gets so much hate, I have to be really careful. So I hope you can understand and respect my decision either way. Again, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to be doing at this point, but you'll see when this video goes live. Another thing I wanted to express is that this video is going to focus solely on using your own blood in occult rituals. I'm not going to really be talking about using animal blood and animal sacrifice, things like that. That does have a place in other spiritual traditions, especially if we're talking about old pagan rituals, but I personally do not condone animal sacrifice. That is not something I incorporate into my own practice. And I absolutely do not condone using someone else's blood in occult rituals that did not give you consent. So that is why this video is mainly going to focus on just using your own blood. For liability reasons, I don't want to talk about using other people's blood. I don't want to talk about animal blood. Last disclaimer, please do not watch the rest of this video if you are squeamish or if this is a very sensitive topic for you. Obviously, you can see by the title of this video, we're going to be talking about blood. I may show images up on the screen, so definitely click off if that is something that makes you feel uncomfortable. With all that said, we are going to talk a little bit about vampirism, necromancy, witchcraft. There's so many different angles that we're going to come at this with, so let's begin. Let's start with the most basic question, what is blood magic? There are a lot of things that come to mind when we hear the words blood and magic put together. It usually refers to the use of blood in some sort of occult or esoteric tradition. You are using the blood as some sort of spiritual connection, and we're going to explore all the different facets to blood magic, but you're using it in your rituals to gain a desired effect. Some common misconceptions: some people think that if you're using blood in occult rituals, especially if you're using your own, that you just hack open your hand with a saw or some rusty blade and you drip a bunch of blood all over the floor, and no, absolutely not. There are ethical considerations. There is a way to practice blood magic ethically, safely, in a clean and sterile way. Okay, we're not just slashing open our hands and letting blood drip all over the place and being irresponsible. Blood magic is also sometimes called sanguine magic, and this is something that should not be taken lightly. In my opinion, blood magic is the most potent and powerful form of magic. Your blood is your life force. It is sacred. In some traditions, it can be said to carry chi or prana, your innate spiritual energy. Blood also connects us to our ancestors, our biological ancestors, that is. Blood is also life-sustaining. It is something that is so important to the human experience and to our survival. Blood is primal, and it can link us to this more primitive aspect of ourselves. I wanted to briefly talk about the history of blood magic, not a full history, because there are so many different ways that pagan Pagan rituals have been conducted using blood as offerings or an exchange of energy. If we look to the east, there were some shamanic cultures that believed if you drank blood, you were drinking that person's energy or that soul, and it would give you some sort of supernatural powers to be able to be prophetic, have these visions or dreams. So shamans would occasionally drink the blood of others. If we look to the south, there are Mesoamerican practices that utilizes blood as a way to sacrifice. The idea of sacrifice was so deeply symbolic and spiritual. Sacrifice to your gods or any spiritual entities that you're working with. There was a practice of bloodletting in Mayan cultures, and basically at its core, it symbolized this renewal of energy, of life force. And if we look to the Aztecs, they used blood sacrifices often as a sacrifice to the sun god. All around the world for centuries, there is this idea of sacrifice, offering, energy exchange or transference, and it would be nearly impossible for me to explore the depth of those blood rituals in a simple YouTube video that deserves to be a whole anthropological study of its own. So there are 4 different aspects that I have personally identified amongst all different blood magic rituals, and it's not necessary for the magician or occultist or witch to incorporate all 4 of these aspects in their blood magic practice. These are just 4 main categories that I have really identified of why people would perform blood magic and what it can be used for, and the occultist can really kind of adapt this to their own magical practice to see what sort of style fits them. But the 4 categories that I have identified are offerings, sacrifice, energy, and tag locks. Offerings and sacrifice kind of go hand in hand sometimes, so we'll explore that too. Let's start with offerings. This is a very basic practice among many spiritual traditions, especially in necromancy, by offering some of your blood. And this doesn't have to be a lot of blood. Again, we're not hacking and slashing our hands and dripping blood all over the place. Really only a couple drops of blood is all that you need. But the idea of offering a couple drops of blood to the dead, to any other spiritual entities you may be working with, to gods or goddesses, it can be seen as the highest level of respect. These entities, whether they are ancestors, gods, other spiritual beings, they do not have life force like humans do. They do not carry blood. And so for us to offer a little bit of our life force to them is not only a major offering from us, but it's also something that is often desired by spiritual entities because it's something that they don't have. So in a necromancy practice, you'll often see if someone is working with the dead, maybe you're going to a graveyard and you are standing over a grave wanting to speak to a particular spirit, you would prick your finger, drop a couple drops of your blood onto the grave, and then chant your desires and do the rest of your ritual to really invoke or evoke that spirit. Or let's say you're working with a god or a particular god or goddess, whoever it is that you're working with, you could sit in front of your altar with a bowl of water, and as you do your offerings to this deity, you just prick your finger and you can drop a couple drops of your blood into that water and leave it for the god or goddess to energetically consume. Obviously, gods, goddesses, spirits, ancestors, they don't have the ability to physically consume food and drink. It's not about them actually drinking the blood water. Depending on your perspective, at least, it's either about the act of offering or about those deities or spirits absorbing the essence of that blood water, not necessarily drinking the blood water itself. Giving offerings is an excellent way to strengthen your relationship with spirits. So if there are certain spirits that you're working with that you're wanting to start making pacts with, offering a couple drops of blood in exchange for what the spirit can provide for you is a perfect transaction if you're wanting to do a spiritual pact. I get that question a lot. If you're working with a new spirit and you want to make a pact with them, what can you offer them that would really entice them to actually get the job done and do their part of the spiritual pact? And one of the most common things that you can offer them is just a couple drops of blood. Now let's talk about sacrifice, because as I mentioned, offerings and sacrifice can kind of go hand in hand. Although offerings can be to just any spiritual entity, even ones that you're making pacts with, and you're not necessarily needing to sacrifice anything to honor them. But there is an aspect of blood magic rituals that really goes into sacrifice and what that means to the individual. The pain itself of extracting that blood is part of the offering. So it's not just the blood that you are dripping into water or that you are dripping over a grave. It is the pain of actually pricking your finger in order to get that blood. Not everyone is going to incorporate this element of sacrifice, and that's okay, but I do think it's still important to mention here. If you are working with a god of war, let's say you're working with Mars, which is literally the god of war, what better sacrifice than to not only offer your blood, but also offer that mild discomfort as a way to sacrifice and make it a little bit more meaningful. When you prick your finger, you are telling the god of war that you are ready to go to battle. You are ready to endure just a little bit of pain for the achievement and success that you're actually hoping for. Or sometimes the relationship is not even about getting stuff from a god or a goddess or a spiritual entity. Sometimes it's about just honoring that god or goddess in general, in which case, to appease the gods in some spiritual traditions, you would make those blood sacrifices, and they would include a little bit of pain. If we're looking back at ancient pagan rituals, things got really bloody and really painful, and the pain was part of that experience. And in modern day, I don't think that's necessary whatsoever. Like I said, just a simple finger prick is really all that's necessary in my opinion. I don't think that we need to go hardcore and make it an incredibly painful experience. But if you are going to incorporate some sort of sacrificial element, reflect on what sacrifice means to you. This is a really great journaling opportunity. So we've talked about offerings, we've talked about sacrifice. Now I want to talk about energy, which is another really important aspect of blood magic. Because blood carries your life force, your energy, it is so potent with energy. You can use your blood to power your rituals. And there is also this idea of exchanging energy as well. When you are potentially consuming someone else's blood, I do not condone doing this. Okay, we're going to talk about blood-borne pathogens later on in this video. The healthcare practitioner in me says, please don't do that, that's unsafe. But if you were to think about consuming someone else's blood, they are giving up some of their life force for you to consume, and the idea is that you would become a lot more powerful. That was the idea in a lot of ancient traditions. Even in some vampyric cultures, because I want to talk about vampirism a little bit now, there may be some instances where a vampyric practitioner decides to bake a couple drops of someone's blood into some sort of baked good and then consume the item, and in that consumption you are gaining the power, the energy from that person. There are also many traditions where you would put a drop of blood in water or a drop of blood in a goblet of wine, and then that goblet of wine would be passed around or maybe just drank by one person in order to ingest, to increase their personal power by consuming the power of someone else. But again, I do not condone drinking other people's blood. If you want to do this symbolically, you can just add some red food dye. There are so many other alternatives to this if you want to just think about symbolically exchanging energy, because drinking other people's blood, it can spread diseases, you can get an overload of iron, and people can die. So it's a serious matter. Please don't do that. Also, the idea on energy transference and really giving yourself up or giving some of your energy to someone else for them to consume. If we think about it in a BDSM sense and we talk about sex magic, there are times where if you have a sigil that you want to trace on your partner's body, you can take a couple drops of your blood and use it to trace that sigil on your partner's body, or vice versa. They can use their blood to trace, whatever the dynamic looks like for you. But you could definitely imagine in a lot of different BDSM scenarios, not just taking sigils and tracing, but just BDSM in general, when there is a little bit of blood play, how that factors into energy transference. But because blood carries your energy, you can use it in your own occult rituals, using your own blood to anoint one of your tools. You can just add a couple drops of your blood to your ritual space to really just boost things up and give it a lot of oomph and a lot of power. And because of course blood ties us to our physical bodies, as I mentioned previously, it also ties us to our ancestors. So anytime you're doing any sort of ancestral ritual, I highly recommend considering blood magic as part of that ritual. Let's talk about the last aspect that I typically see in blood magic rituals, and that is tag locks. So tag locks, if you are unaware, it is basically just something that ties the magical working to the practitioner. Tag locks can be anything from hair to nail clippings to saliva to blood, anything that ties you to a particular person. So let's say you're sitting down to do some sort of ritual on yourself and you want to tie that ritual to you. You could use a couple drops of your blood, a little bit of your hair, saliva, whatever it is that you're wanting to use in that moment to really link it to you. Or let's say you're going to do a ritual for someone else. You want to do something for a family member, a friend, your spouse, whoever it is. Rather than using using your own, obviously you would want to use someone else's hair, someone else's saliva, etc. That way when you're sitting down to do the ritual, that ritual is tied to them and it's not tied to you. So tag locks are really just a way to tell the ritual where the energy needs to be directed. And if we think about tag locks, hair, nail clipping, saliva, etc., when we talk about blood, that is the most potent tag lock that you can use because it's tied to your innate energy. And this is where I want to reiterate that I do not condone using other people's blood for tag locks without their consent. I'm not going to talk about on this video using someone else's blood because that is a whole liability issue for me and we are not going to discuss that. You can use your blood in this way to consecrate your tools. So again, if you take a couple drops of your blood and you want to anoint your athame, your wand, whatever it is that you're using, that is such a powerful way to tie those items to you and only you. So now that we've talked about the different aspects that can go into a blood magic practice, I want to talk about the properties of blood a little bit further so you can get a better understanding of where it may be appropriate to use blood in a ritual. So blood can be very protective and healing. If we think about the healing properties of blood, blood brings nutrients and oxygen to an area. If we think about the protective qualities of blood, blood will form clots in certain areas. And so if we think about these clotting factors of blood and also the fact that it can bring new nutrients and oxygen and all the wonderful things your body needs, anytime you need to do a ritual surrounding protection or healing, it would be appropriate to use blood. Blood is also great for cleansing because not only does it bring the nutrients and oxygen to areas that need it, it also carries all the waste away and discards that. It quite literally carries waste away from cells and takes it where it needs to go. I have found that blood magic is also excellent for offensive magic. So if baneful magic is something that you're wanting to get into, blood magic packs a punch. It really does because it carries your energy. It is so potent and powerful and aggressive. It connects you to your primal nature. It is also the color red, and red relates to Mars, the god of war. Have you ever heard the phrase, "It's coursing through my veins," or "It's flowing through my veins"? And that phrase is usually used with such intensity and passion for whatever the person is talking about. The idea of something coursing through your veins is very passionate. It's got that oomph, that drive, and that power. And because it is that crimson red color, it is just great for all kinds of war magic. The only thing I want to note here is that remember that your blood is going to tie the working to you. So if you're doing some sort of baneful magic against someone else, and let's say you're sitting down to do a candle ritual and you want that candle, you want the energy to be sent to someone else and not you, do not use your blood to anoint the candle with it because you are now linking your working to you rather than to the other person. But what you could do instead is you could take a couple drops of blood and use it to paint your face as a symbol of war. There are so many cultures over time and space that have used blood to literally paint their faces before war as an offering and a sacrifice to their gods, and also to terrify or intimidate their enemies. So think of bringing that symbolism in and potentially taking a couple drops of your blood to paint your face prior to doing any sort of offensive or war magic. Again, don't put it on a candle if that candle is not meant for you. That would just be a very poor decision. Let's talk about menstrual blood, because I personally believe, and you will have to develop your own personal gnosis about this, so please feel free to develop your own ideas, but I personally believe that menstrual blood is not appropriate in every single situation. Yes, menstrual blood can absolutely be used in blood magic, just the same as any other blood that is coursing through your body. It can link us to the divine feminine as well, so let's say you're working with a goddess, you're working with Venus, Aphrodite, you know, somebody that links to the divine feminine. Offering up a little bit of your menstrual blood would be a perfectly applicable way of connecting to that goddess. However, if you're offering up menstrual blood to Mars, a god of war, that symbolism doesn't quite make sense. I also think it's important to consider the extra symbolism that menstrual blood has, because first of all, there is no sacrifice of you pricking your finger and feeling a little bit of pain. And I know immediately some people would say, well, periods are really painful, so yes, there is some sort of pain sacrifice element to it. However, I would argue that pain is going to happen regardless. That is not an additional sacrifice that you are making towards a god. That is something you have to endure potentially once a month anyways, so I don't personally see the sacrifice element to it. But again, that's my own personal opinion. You can make your own opinion about that. But thinking about the symbolism of menstrual blood in that it is something that is being discarded from your body. So it would be excellent in occult rituals where you are trying to let things go and release things. I think menstrual blood would be so perfect for something like that. But if you're wanting to manifest something and bring something towards you, using menstrual blood, which is blood that has basically a bunch of stuff in it that your body doesn't want anymore, that is being ejected from your body, may not be the best symbolism to use. However, menstrual blood could be a good tag lock. I could see arguments for that because it is your blood. It is something you could use to link your workings to you. Perfectly appropriate to use as a tag lock, or again, an offering to a goddess that is connected to the divine feminine. And I don't want to discourage people from using menstrual blood because I think there are so many different situations where it is appropriate. I just don't think it is the exact same as using blood that you have pricked from your finger during a sacrifice. Fresh blood, in my opinion, is different than menstrual blood. So who should not do blood magic? First of all, I want to say I never want to tell anybody what to do. That's not what I do here on this channel. You can do whatever you want, but I would discourage beginners from getting into any sort of blood magic. And the reason is blood is so potent and powerful. It really kicks up your rituals and your spell work to a completely different level. And for beginners who haven't really honed in how to do magic yet, how to write intentions properly, or the proper techniques for centering, grounding, and directing your energy, you know, just the basics like that. For someone who hasn't really figured out how to do magic effectively yet, you may still be in a phase of your magical practice where you do experience backfires. And it would be a terrible thing if you performed blood magic to kick up your spell work times 1,000 and then your spell accidentally backfired for whatever reason, because that's what happens sometimes, especially as a beginner. And then the repercussions of that are so much larger than they would have been if you had not used blood magic. So I don't recommend doing blood magic for beginners. Get into a groove of your own magical practice first before you even attempt to add blood into the mix. It's basically like taking gasoline and dumping it over a bonfire and then taking a blowtorch and blowing that thing up. So you definitely want to be more careful. Another person that I think would not benefit from blood magic is people that struggle with self-harm behaviors. If you have any sort of self-harm addictions or health issues that are similar, that are really going to impact your ability to do this safely, obviously I would not recommend it to those individuals that are a little bit more at risk. So if you're gonna do blood magic, how do you do it safely? Let's talk about it. Like I said in the beginning of this video, we're not hacking, slashing, dropping a bunch of blood on the table. No, you really only need a couple drops at a time. 1 to 3 drops usually for a ritual is what I use. You don't have to go overboard with it. And I want to put a little clause in here about bloodborne pathogens, because bloodborne pathogens are microorganisms like viruses and bacteria, can be carried in the blood to cause disease in people. There are many, many different types of bloodborne pathogens. In fact, I'm going to list off a couple for you. Malaria, syphilis, hepatitis B, HBV, hepatitis C, HCV, HIV is another one. Okay, these are things that we need to be taking seriously. So I'm going to take you over to my desk in a moment and I'm going to demonstrate how it's done. I'm not going to actually draw my real blood, of course, on camera because that would be silly, but I'll demonstrate it enough to where you can get the idea. Do not do blood packs where you and a friend prick each other's fingers and then mash them all together. Don't do that. Do not play with other people's blood for fun. If you're wanting to do blood play in a sense, say you're wanting to bring this vampyric element into a BDSM scene, or maybe just some sort of an occult ritual, use fake blood. Fake blood is perfectly appropriate. If you still want that feeling, that aesthetic, you can invoke a little bit of pain if you want to really make it feel like you're extracting real blood, but then use fake blood. Just please do not swirl everyone's blood around. That is just so dangerous. And lastly, you do not want your wound to become infected either. I'm assuming most people watching this are already smart enough not to do these things, but you know, I have to say it. I have to say it in a video like this. So anyways, let me take you to my table and I'll show you how it's done. So I highly recommend getting a lancing device like this. And if you type in lancet or lancing device, anything like that, I think if you use specifically the keywords blood lancet, it'll pull up a bunch of different brands that have pens exactly like this. You can find them pretty much much anywhere. You can find them on Amazon or any other store. A lancing device is probably the easiest and most effective way to get a couple drops of blood, in my opinion. But this one in particular, you can see this number right here, so you can actually change the penetration depth. I believe it has a range 1 through 5. I usually leave it on 3. And then what you do, usually it comes with instructions on how to prepare your lancing device, also how to clean and disinfect the device, how to dispose of the lancets, etc. But there is a little tiny hole. I don't know if you can see it or not. There's a little tiny hole on the end of this right here, and that is where the needle comes out of if you've never seen one of these before. So what you do is you prep it beforehand by pressing this button down. So if you heard that little click, this is now prepped and ready to go. And this is going to be the trigger button right here. So all I would do is start by washing my hands, of course. Washing your hands in warm water is really helpful. So wash your hands beforehand, then get this all prepped, and then you put this on your finger like so, and then I would just hit the trigger button, and it very quickly and painlessly pokes a hole in my thumb so I can extract a couple drops. Afterwards, again, you want to wash your hands. Use a band-aid if you need to. I usually don't need to because these holes are so small that they heal very, very quickly. So just make sure you're washing your hands before and afterwards. And that's it. Super simple. So let's talk about resources for everything that we've talked about today. I've got a couple books that I want to show you, and we'll talk about some other things as well. For people that are interested in vampirism specifically, I would recommend checking out Vampire Sanguinomicon, the Lexicon of the Living Vampire, and this is by Father Sebastian. I suggest this book because I feel like he does a great job conveying the relationship with blood in different vampiric practices, and he kind of gives a broad perspective of the vampire community as a whole, so I think it's just a great beginner book for someone interested in vampirism. I also have a video on vampirism if you're interested, so I will link that below in the description box. And then if you want to dive deeper into vampiric philosophy, I would recommend reading anything by Michelle Bellinger. I'm pretty sure I mispronounced that last name, but she is considered a staple in the community. Read anything by her. And for vampirism, I just really recommend talking to people in the community, you know, joining Facebook groups or finding Reddit groups and just actually talking to the individuals that are part of these communities. This next one, nobody's going to be surprised that I recommend this, but this is called The Bones Fall in a Spiral. It is a necromantic primer by Mortellus. So for those that are more interested on the necromancy side of things, when we're talking about blood magic, this book goes into using blood in a necromancy sense, and then also a lot of substitutions as well, which I really loved. If you are looking for more of a witchcraft perspective when it comes to blood, I think this book is pretty good for beginners. It is called Of Blood and Bones by Kate Fruhler. It's very beginner friendly, so it goes over a wide range of practices that have to do with blood and bones in a witchcraft sense, but it doesn't necessarily deep dive into any one particular thing. So that is why I would recommend this book more to beginners than, you know, intermediate to advanced practitioners. So I definitely don't think your reading should stop here by any means, but I hope that gives you a little bit better of an introduction into vampirism, necromancy, and witchcraft as it pertains to blood specifically. I am still looking for my favorite book on blood magic. I wish I had a book to recommend that really deep dives into blood magic across many cultures. Unfortunately, I just don't have a favorite yet that I can share with you all, but this at least gives you a really good starting place. And again, feel free to check out my video on vampiric magic and try to find like-minded individuals in the community that you can talk to that have experience with these types of things. Thank you so much for watching this video and taking the time to really understand such a sacred practice. I hope you gained a lot from it. This is something that I am really passionate about. I hope you all have a blessed day. I'll see you in another video very soon.